and then we can get started.
Awesome.
So, saRah, thank you for joining in on this project. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we can just enjoy our time together and we can learn a little bit about your spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
So, just to start off, as I always ask, I want to know what was your spiritual journey like in your childhood growing up?
Cool. Thank you for even inviting me and like thinking of me in this because I mean I love talking about all things spiritual. It was something that definitely my mom and certain family members of mine normalized growing up. I was raised definitely Southern Baptist, even though my dad's side of the family is Catholic. So, I mean, growing up,
Interesting.
yeah, we were my dad's white and my mom's Black and Native. So it was a, it was very different. So we'd be going to mass in the summers when I was with my grandma and then coming back here and then going to church every Sunday and cleaning it up on Saturdays and going on Wednesdays. So I always had a lot of questions, and I found that spirituality was, and when I say that, I mean, when I was younger, it was really just talks about nature or talks about how different groups of people worship and how not everything is, or how that worship doesn't always have to look like sitting in a church and, you know, reading out of a Bible, but how, you just taking care of your body and going outside and, experiencing time in nature and just sort of like all these different things that sort of have that overlap between something that's like transcendent and religious, but then also spiritual. Um, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't like the today how we think about spirituality, how it sort of has like a face to it. I wouldn't say it was that back then. It was probably something more so like pagan, just more so nature based, because spirituality has really just become its own entity, really, in our times.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that you have that various background, your father being Catholic, your mother being Southern Baptist. Can you go a little further into how it sort of affected the way you saw religion?
Oh yeah. So my dad, he is like one of six kids, and they're all Catholic, and he was the only one who wanted to branch off from that and be Baptist. So already there was this narrative within my household, which you hear with a lot of Southern Baptists, of this is the way. Like there's a lot of other people and they can preach a lot of other things, but we look at the word. So already I started to have a lot of questions, and I started to notice that whether it be the mass I was attending with my grandma over the summers or just the white and Black churches that I had attended, everything was different. Every place was different. And I
Yeah.
kept trying to figure that out, like what, like there's this idea of God, but then there's this idea of Jesus, and then some people have this focus on Mary, and it just always made me feel bad that there was like a right and a wrong, or
Mm.
the
Makes sense.
questions that I had were like, you know what I'm saying, meshed with that.
Yes, it's kind of like that black and white aspect of it. Because
Mhm.
I was raised Southern Baptist too, and I heard that a lot. It's like, especially when I was in college, and I also went to Meredith, and we would take a world religions class. And I asked a family friend of mine, I was like, "What do you think about me taking world religion and studying different religions?" He was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's okay, but just just don't make sure you're not like trying to convert over to one of those religions, or just like say, what we're preaching and what we learned at church, that's it. That's the right way. Like that's the
Right.
word." And he was like Southern Baptist too. So I think I agree with you in that regard. I had a lot of questions. I was like,
Mhm.
but you go to this church and they say something particularly different, and you go to that church and they say something different. Same Bible verses, same books, but different interpretations. So
Right.
it really like, so what is the real truth? What's the real interpretation? And that's what prompted me to ask a lot of questions too.
For sure, for sure. And especially when you start to feel like you were saying and touching on like that intolerance of like, it's okay if you're taking this world religion class, but you gotta know who you are. You gotta make sure you're not, swaying too far, getting too, and I definitely feel like that not to say just not intolerance, but it's just like that willingness to just there's like this one universal way that I find is not just something that's, you find just within religion, but it's definitely within spirituality too. Cause a lot of folks like, this is the way. Because, when people want to get into whether you're wanting to feel a religious family or wanting to be in a spiritual community, both of those things, there's people who have a certain desire to want to do it and sometimes a vulnerability, and you definitely have to be aware of folks wanting to whether it's pressuring you to keep you in that Southern Baptist church and that mindset, or pressuring you and trying to keep you into one way of practicing your spiritual or walking your spiritual walk, because it's crazy.
It is very
it's crazy to navigate in these times.
And just go further, you also said that through your mother, you have Native American, ancestry, heritage. Do you, well, I'm saying, do you incorporate, your Native American heritage to your spirituality?
I would say that's definitely something I'm always open to and always wanting to learn about, because it was something that since then my mom has passed and a lot of my family members are a lot older. So like getting even the opportunity to talk to, older family members or elders in the community that would have more information is definitely something that I'm always open to and trying to gravitate towards. But it really is just taking the things and the seeds that my mom has like dropped along the way and just really trying to take that and not to say take it and run with it, but there's just certain things that have always been normalized in my life, whether it be, an appreciation for nature and, not just appreciating nature, but knowing that, it has its own life, it has its own place. We have, whether it be certain animals or, I would definitely say there are different elements that would probably overlap with Native heritage. And it's definitely something I always want to explore, but it's not something that I always feel like I have access to, if that makes sense, or readily have access to learn more about.
Yeah.
But I do try to seek it out when I can.
So I know for me, like with my spiritual journey, there was kind of like somewhat of a big turning point or a big experience that happened to me, and it kind of turned me over to having a spiritual journey. What has something similar like that happened to you, like a tragic event or maybe like some sort of breakthrough in your life that kind of changed your perspective of spirituality?
Mm. I would definitely say I don't know if it was necessarily one event per se. I know I was interested in it. I know when I first came to Meredith, it was something I was always interested in. But my freshman year, I made a friend and he was really into it and like started introducing me to like tarot cards and like lots of different, things that you see within the spiritual community. But I've witnessed this friend sort of get manipulated. And through that, that was sort of like the event, I would say, that made me kind of step back and think, it's kind of scary that, I don't want to just talk to this one person about this thing or feel like I have to go to this person for these answers. So I would say like through seeing someone go through some type of manipulation or something a little scary, I think that made me step back and sort of, not to say distance myself, but really just explore on my own at my own rate and speed. And then that ended up with me traveling to Iceland and studying abroad and then living in Hawaii for a while. And both of those places, the people who live there are super spiritual. So I think just by being around people who normalize something else, I had an opportunity to understand that, wow, there are people in the world who, you know, do things differently, and it's not weird, and it's real. So I think that just, you know, that just seeing the way that different people live and experience spirituality on a daily basis made me more comfortable with the experiences that I was having on the day to day once I got back here.
Yeah. And I also think that is very interesting what you said about not learning about spirituality just for one person, but just like kind of learn at your own rate. And I think it's very important to have discernment,
Mm-hmm.
uh, not just like in a spiritual journey, but everything you do in your life. And that's a big part of it because energy and spirituality, they kind of go hand in hand, very important pieces. And I like to say that energy is everything. Everything is energy. So, from your perspective, well, how do you think energy impacts the way that we interact with people or the way that we see other people or even see ourselves?
Mm. Mm. Definitely, I feel like that gut instinct, that feeling of knowing, and that when you can just tap into that energy, I think that's something that everyone can feel and experience. Now, for me, if you're asking me, that's what I live by. Like, and it's not even like trying to be judgmental, but it's that discernment. And like 4 years ago, I could not just look at pictures and feel people and feel their energy. But it's gotten to the point where I can just look. Not always. I'm not gonna say like it's just
Yeah.
here it is. But for the most part, it's like I trust in this point in my life, I trust wholeheartedly whatever those feelings are that I get initially. And while I do keep myself, I humble myself enough to know that I don't know everything and keep an open mind. I don't sway from what my gut tells me about the energy about something.
Yeah.
Whether it just be, or I guess it's just, I will say my dreams tell me more than anything else. And it's like if I have a feeling about somebody, or whether that energy is one thing in my waking life, once I go to sleep and I may have an interactions with someone like in my dream, in my dream state.
Yeah, I'm a big dream person too.
Yeah, I'm like, I already know what it is. Or we'll see certain stuff. I'm curious what your dreams would tell you on that front.
Um, I think it comes for me, not just like people interacting with people, but kind of like a premonition or kind of like foreshadowing for things to come.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big thing for me. But it's kind of crazy to think that dreams can kind of help you along your path. And that was something that I didn't really understand at first. You know, I just thought a dream was a dream. Like dreams can't like really be real. But as
Right.
I really like tapped into like that spiritual energy, I started to have more vivid dreams. And it was like so real, like you just felt like you were really living in like
Mm-hmm.
that reality. And I think personally, for me, especially since I am like in that early career phase, it's like I begin to like have like these vivid dreams about like potential career paths that I could take. And I went to Meredith. I was international studies major and a dance minor, and I really wanted to like work overseas and be a foreign diplomat. Like that's what I was focused on. But after a while, I started to have like vivid dreams about me like holding a camera, and I
Mm.
always loved photography, but I never really saw myself taking it on as a career. I just saw it as a hobby. But the more dreams I began to have, I began to like turn them into reality. Then I started like taking more photos, taking more pictures, and I realized that I had like a gift to make images, and I really enjoyed it. So I was like, wow, like there's potential there. So I really kept going with it and like paying attention to my dreams. And I had a dream one night that I was actually like in a classroom like studying. But the thing is, like I had graduated from Meredith recently, so I was like, why am I back in class when I just graduated?
Right, I thought I was done.
And then like a couple months later, I worked for a nonprofit in Durham for about a year, and my supervisor was just like, we see that you're very passionate about photography and you want to start your own business. So they signed me up for a photography class. So that
Awesome.
was kind of like, oh, this is what was going on. So I took that photography class for about a semester. I was like, okay, my dreams do tell me something. So that's what like really like made me a big believer, like how dreams can kind of help cultivate your reality. Not saying it will, but it kind of helps you. It's like a guide.
Right. Yeah, like how you were saying, like that foreshadowing and just like showing you your innermost, what could or couldn't happen, or who knows. Some part of me sometimes thinks our dreams are a parallel universe on a different planet, on a different universe somewhere. Who knows? But I going back to, like what you were asking me earlier about certain things like within Native culture, like is that something that, or like how my mom might have exposed me to that. That's another thing that was like always normalized, but I didn't really realize until I went to school and started to learn that people don't really care about dreams anymore. But prior to like the last couple hundred of years, dreams were always like super important. And people
Yeah.
looked to dreams to find out like what was about to happen, or like you were saying, like those forewarnings of things that could potentially come. Because I know you could probably relate to this. When something is just, a fun dream or just, something in passing versus when you wake up and you feel like, okay, there's something from this that I need to take with me in my waking life.
Yeah. And especially when the dream is repeated,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you just feel like, okay, this is deja vu. And you're like, I
Mhm.
feel like I had this dream before. That's like a big sign that this is something you need to pay attention to. And I've had dreams like that several times where it would be like a sign, and maybe I felt maybe I could like pay attention to it or catch it, and then I have that dream again, maybe like the next night or maybe like a couple nights after the fact, and then it'll come back up. And it was like that was like another thing that made me a big believer in like how dreams can really help us in our life experiences.
Mm, yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
And I think another thing for me, another question I would have for you is about, you know, the cultural aspect of spirituality. And, you know, sometimes people can kind of steer towards cultural appropriation of certain, you know, spiritual cultures, particularly like indigenous cultures. I
Mhm.
have noticed there's been like a lot of appropriation there. Like, what are some of your thoughts on that that particular piece, and what would be kind of some like suggestions of how one can go about learning it so they cannot like cross those lines, or folks cannot cross those lines and particularly like appropriate a culture,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of people mean well and they just want to like be on their spiritual journey. It's not saying, oh, they're doing it to like, you know, be bad or like trying to demonize, you know, a certain culture. But I just feel like there's still that responsibility to learn so you won't make that mistake or cross that boundary again. So I
Oh,
just
yeah.
kind of wanted to know like your thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all something that's fun and aesthetically pleasing on Instagram, but this stuff is no joke. This is real. Like this is real, and like real life. And the type of warfare that I feel like we're going under right now, as much as it is physical and so many other things, it is first and foremost to me spiritual. And it goes to a lot of what you were just saying about that appropriation, and just as much as people can mean well, there just is a lack of understanding from the get about like respect. And I feel like a lot of the times people just want to hop on the bandwagon. You know what I mean? There's not even to say hop on the bandwagon, but we live in times where unfortunately we look to the media, we look to social media, we look to TV and magazines and all these things to tell us what's relevant, what's important, and how we should be. And I understand how people can want to better themselves, but like this whole, there's a difference between mindfulness and wellness and self-care. And even though those things overlap with spirituality, I feel like a lot of folks just feel entitled to just cherry pick and like not really commit to really knowing, not even knowing that there is a commitment to this bigger understanding, opposed to just I mean, I try not to demonize folks, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who are just curious. And unfortunately, there's a lot of sacred ways and sacred practices that need to stay off of social media, because if it was, it would be commercialized, like half these things that we see. So it's a slippery slope in that regard. But at the end of the day, it's just tricky, because I know at Meredith, like I took a Native American religions class and we looked up, I remember one day on Google, for example, a blessing way. So when you look up this Native American ceremony that happens when a woman's about, basically like a baby shower, what we would call it.
Yeah.
When you look it up, the first 8 searches are all white women doing their own interpretation of this. So even if you have a good faith effort and really wanting to know, there's so much oversaturation by these bigger companies and these bigger people who, they don't own moccasins, they don't own beaded earrings, they don't own half of these things. The fact that there's people of all races still selling smudge kits with white sage is like,
Yeah, and it's crazy.
why?
One of my closest friends, she has Afro-Indigenous heritage, and she was talking to me about that. And she was saying like white sage is very sacred, but it's also kind of scarce. Like you can't really get.
Yeah, it's endangered.
It's really endangered. Yeah. And she was like really cautioning people like this is endangered. You know, you can't really, you know, be using it, especially if like Native American tribes, they really need it for a part of their spiritual practice. And I got into like smudging, but I did my research first. Obviously, I didn't want to like potentially overstep those boundaries and like get in like sage before, you know, I realized like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be using this. And
Right.
And every time I see it on my Instagram a lot too, like a lot of my Instagram timeline is like spiritual related. So I see it and I'm just like, no, this should not be commercialized. Do you like really understand like the implications of like, okay, this plant is endangered.
Right, because you're burning it for one thing and for protection and this and the third, but at the same time, like, I don't know how good it's going to be when something's over harvested, and then the people who are over harvesting it, going back to energy, like, I'm not trying to say people have bad intentions if you're harvesting sage, but you know what I'm saying? You're not necessarily working. There's things that are going on that need to be checked, and you're still, I don't know, it's like we're still using things that are being touched in such a way and used by certain people that, you know, as much, it's like buying something secondhand. Anytime you have something secondhand, if you're sensitive spiritually, I feel like you're gonna know that it has someone else's energy on it.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive. I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath, and I always have, I don't want to say always, but the majority of the time I have a way of knowing if someone's energy has been, you know, on this particular object, or, you know, even like after having a conversation with them and I feel their energy. And that's another big thing is very important. You don't really know where this sage is coming from or who's like vulnerable to sage and what kind of energy that they had that was brought onto that sage as well. And it's not just like with like smudging sage, but just like anything you connect with or, you know, have contact with, like a person. Or I like to use this analogy about food. You know, when you cook your food, like say if you're like full of good energy and you know your energy is high, your spirits are high, then you know that affects the way you cook your food. And then when you eat the food, that energy comes with it. And then on the flip side, if you're like feeling crappy and you're not really in the best mood and you're just feeling down, then that kind of affects in your food, and then that food is transferred along with that energy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very important. And I'm kind of like to the point where, I have like the incense and, my candles and stuff, but that's kind of like as far I'm willing to go in terms of like kind of like tools to use. But I know a lot of people, and you see it on Instagram, like the aestheticization of it, they have like all the crystals and, tarot cards and like the whole 9 yards. And sometimes it just makes you wonder, is it already aestheticization to like make it be aesthetically pleasing, or are you really like that deep into the journey that you require, all of those things? It's, and then we have to also like this is social media. Social media only
Right.
gives you a smidget of one's reality, not really the whole picture.
Right. Yeah, I resonate with that too. And I try to just go back to like the discernment that we were talking about and just follow my gut, because even, even the most, even when I do feel like, this is a person who's not doing this for the likes, or this is not just something that's aesthetically pleasing, like it really just takes, engaging and like having those conversations, I feel like, to really sometimes gauge where someone's at. Because there's times when you can just see some stuff and you're just like, this just is not for me. And that's okay. It's okay, because, people are on different parts of their walk. But at the same time, it also is just like, it can be tricky to say, well, when do I step in versus when do I just realize this isn't a battle I need to fight? Now, for me, like if I see somebody appropriating some stuff, oh no, like people, that goes against the Native American Arts and Crafts Act. Like, no, like you're sitting here literally taking money away from somebody because you want to just say, you want to wear a headdress and you think that that's okay to sell headdresses, and like that's not an earned item. Like sometimes if it's someone who's doing something that I feel like is going to promote something negatively, like, or like someone or like this account that I saw was promoting white sage, it won't be I'm gonna come for you. It's really just in the comments like, hey, I'm just gonna throw out this information, do with it what you want. Because at the end of the day, there are folks out there who continue to commercialize spirituality because it's a business for them.
Absolutely.
And they're in the business of making money, not necessarily in the business of helping folks, on their spiritual walk.
And that can be said about religion too. And
yeah,
like thinking like the big mega churches. And, I'm always one to like watch documentaries, not only like spirituality, but in religion as well. Kind of like not just like the upsides of it, but the downsides of it. And it just reminds me, I was watching this like mini documentary someone made on YouTube about like mega churches and how it made tons of money. And they live like these luxurious lives. And it just feels like no one really bats an eye, because especially in the congregations, like they're like these almighty, like powerful men and or women of God. So they just feel like they can get away with it. And then I feel like if a church is like worth like millions of dollars, and then the congregation is constantly giving, parts of their income to the church, and however, there's a lot of corruption going on behind the scenes, like that's kind of like a business.
Oh yeah.
For the business. They're not really in it because they've been ordained by God, or they feel like they were called by God to do it. This was like a business. And the sad thing is, I see in spirituality too, where you have like these self-proclaimed like gurus, or these spiritual masters, and like they talk a good game, and very good with their words. That's another thing I've noticed about like a lot of those religious and spiritual leaders. Like they're very good with their words, and they just know the exact things to say to get someone hooked. And then unfortunately, people who are really in vulnerable positions, they're the ones that have to like take that heat, because they're in a vulnerable position. They're really like desperately, I don't want to say desperately, that's the best way to say it, like desperately seeking out some kind of relief.
Mm-hmm.
And here, these types of people are going to come and they take advantage of that, them financially, but also mentally and spiritually. So it is a really big issue. And it kind of does go hand in hand in social media because you see a lot of them on social media and they take advantage of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, having this platform where they can really use to like spread their message, which I said, like they're smooth talkers. Well, I think a lot of them are smooth talkers and they come up with this genuine message. But on the flip side, they tend to take advantage of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the saddest part, especially those who are already in vulnerable positions and they just really want to have some kind of relief in the situations that they're in. So
Right.
that's like my big issue behind it too.
Same here. It was so interesting what you said about the mega churches because my minor was in religious and ethical studies, and that was like one of my final papers was comparing how like these mega churches. I was comparing like what basically a clip from a mega church to the Wendy Williams show. And like the timestamps where they had Twitter, like look at my Twitter and look at this, like there's a formula. And it's like people
Wow.
are, you know, that was back then. Obviously it was, I don't even keep up with Wendy Williams anymore now. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole other story
I
time.
don't blame you. I don't blame you.
But you know, looking at it, like you really see folks just preaching this, you know, God wants you to be healthy, God wants you to be wealthy, like all this positive stuff that when people go through hard times, there's not any rhetoric within these mega churches for people to cope and to deal. And the same thing is with this stuff spiritually online, like, or these certain spiritual accounts online. And granted, there's tons of good points, but at the same time, when people are, I'm going to say desperate because there are a lot of people who are desperate for connection, who are desperate for understanding. And even though they don't want to come off as desperate, these people are like vultures feeding off of it. And
Yeah.
like during quarantine, whenever this all first started, like last year, I had more free time. So I was like, you know what? I've never really wanted to make an account to do readings or anything like that. But I was like, I'm just going to make this just to connect with people because I got the time. You know what I'm saying? I've never have wanted to even do that because I don't want people to think I'm some guru and I'm coming to get your coin and I'm going to tell you the answers. Because just to even explain to people, like me pulling a card is not your future. Like this is just what I get an interpretation about the scene around what could or could not happen based off what you choose to do or not. Mm-hmm. Cool. All of that being said, I would do readings for just random people, and I would have people come back to me just offering me money like over and over again. And I didn't feel good taking it because to me, like it's like if I was a doctor and I just ran and seen somebody and or like I'm CPR certified and I see someone fall out and they need mouth to mouth, I'm gonna do it. Like someone is coming to me about something personal and needing some help. And is this something that is a craft? Yes. Is this something that takes a lot of energy? Yes. Do I see why people charge? Yes. But the way that people were coming to me, it just felt like it was scary to know that, you know, someone could want to come to me for some answers and continuously give me money every time. And at that rate, it was more so a conversation about like, look, it's not that I have the answers. This is not nothing that you couldn't do on your own. Like, and in all of that, I was finding that people were really just wanting to connect and have conversations. And I was just like talking to random people. But I'm saying all that to say it's scary. And it's scary to see how the people that I was engaging with, how much money they had given folks. Like a lot, like people are making a full-on living off of, you know, not even telling people, it's not even to say like people are just telling folks what they want to hear, but a lot of the times it's love questions and pregnancy questions and should I stay with this person and have another baby? And like, nah, that ain't worth your $25 for me to tell you to have a baby or not. Like, no. So it's
Oh my God.
it's definitely, it is something that I personally have just backed away from, not because I don't want to, but or that I'm not interested in helping folks, but that community kind of just overwhelmed me, to the point where I felt like if I was going to continue to grow, it was not going to be necessarily, not to say I would not engage with it, but I just felt like it was more important for me to focus on my own, on myself, than like engaging with other people, because there's just so much out there to,
Mm-hmm.
not just that, but just with all the world events that are going on, like there's a lot racially, there's a lot of these things, these overlapping factors that just, um I don't know, that I feel like in this day and age, when it comes to like when people say protect your energy, for me, that, and I know you even mentioned this to me, for me, I don't know if it would be in a complete social media hiatus, but I feel like sometimes I need to.
Yeah, that was like one of my like, I don't want to say I'm not a big New Year resolution person. I like to like set kind of goals for myself, and I said like this year I want to like use it less frequently. And I know it may like be a question like, well, you're doing YouTube videos now and you're trying to start your own podcast. I was like, well, I can just gear my posts to, promoting my blogs and my podcast. Doesn't mean I have to like, scroll down my timeline for hours at a time, because I think I'm realizing now that the time that I'm like scrolling like endlessly on social media, I can be really putting my energy towards like my creations and everything.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like completely take a break in my opinion, but I would like, I try to use it more intentionally as like me like holding myself accountable for how much time I'm on social media.
Mm.
So say like, okay, I did all of my work that I had to do for the day. I work remotely, so I do my remote work first before I even think about getting on social media. And I'd be on social media for a little bit, probably like an hour, and that's pretty much it. And then it's kind of like that little voice in the back of my head is like saying, okay, you've been up here long enough, like time to do something else. And I think it took a while for me to like kind of train that inner voice to like remind me of like, okay, been up here a little longer than you wanted to, or you expected yourself to. It's time to focus on all those things. And I think it really took me to like have to like build that inner voice for me to like really get into a groove of hold
Mm-hmm.
myself accountable, whether how long I stay on social media. And I even started off this new year, I deleted my Instagram app off my phone. I only have Facebook and Instagram, so I guess I'm doing good in that regard. But I deleted the Instagram app off my phone, and same with Facebook. And I noticed how refreshed I was. I started off the new year refreshed, and I was like making plans and like focusing on other things. And I was really happy. That was a really happy moment for me. I was proud of myself for even starting off the new year like that, because
Mm-hmm.
you're always like really like tempted to make like that lengthy happy New Year's post and like
Right.
about your goals and stuff. It's like I'm not gonna like just talk about it on social media. And I kind of try to not tell too many people my goals to begin with, because I feel like if the more I tell, the more I feel like, I don't want to say pressuring, but that's like kind of the best way I can describe it. Like kind of like pressuring, like, okay, I've told
Mm-hmm.
several people my goals, so now I really have to follow through. so so now it's like my relationship to social media is kind of like a marketing tool for like my creations, because I think it all comes down to me also doing that as a career right now, digital marketing, social media marketing. So that may be a piece of it too. So when I'm making blogs or like doing like these kinds of interviews and like my podcast when I'm working on, I was like, yeah, I can still post on social media. It'll just more than likely be for these things and not like talking about other aspects of my life. And I think being on a spiritual journey and seeing like the downside of what spirituality negativity can be, especially on the internet when people are pretty much like commercializing and trying to make profit out of, something that's very deep, something that's
Mm-hmm.
very a lot of hard work. There's a lot of inner work and shadow work that comes with spirituality, but people, I don't say it as like a bad thing or saying these people are bad for doing this, but there is kind of like that surface level spirituality. It's kind of like the whole love and light thing. And
Yes.
that is good. It's good to have like that positive aspect, but it can't just be that.
Right.
You have to
Yeah.
be really open and honest. Like if you're some of the most spiritual people that I've met on my journey, they're older, but I look to them for like guidance, advice and stuff. Like these people, they've been through a lot of painful situations, but
Mm-hmm.
they said like when they tapped into their spiritual energy, they kind of cultivated, that sense of, okay, I've been through this tragic thing, but I'm not a tragedy or I'm not a tragic person.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of people I look towards spiritually, because what that is saying to me is that they're putting in the work to become the best versions of themselves every day. And that's really essentially what it is. You're just working on yourself, you're building yourself, you're growing yourself
Mm-hmm.
every day. And that's the kind of spirituality that I really focus on. But it is kind of sad when you see on social media and people who are obviously in like vulnerable situations. And you can tell like by like reading comments, or I know I can like feel energy off of like certain comments and messages, and it can be really overwhelming. And that's another thing for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't really comment on other people's photos. Like I'll like your photo or I'll see it, but I may not even comment on it for that reason. I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with social media comment sections because of like the energies that people may carry in
Yeah.
the comments. So that's a very big thing for me.
Same here. I was just having a conversation with my partner about that literally today, and about how it's difficult because when you see someone appropriating or you see someone doing something outlandish and just wrong, it's like you are validating your feelings. And at the same time, it's also like, well, how do you also promote good and positivity in the world? Because honestly, when you're online, it is so easy to just get them hands to going and just to come for somebody, or to just, not even if you want to have a negative energy,
It's just really easy to have confrontation. Like,
right. And it's like, it's so hard to have any critiques or to even comment on something, because online things just, it's like, just like this rah, rah, rah energy of like, well, what do you mean? And we, of course, like, it's just so easy to assume the worst, I guess, that what I'm trying to do when I engage online is to, like how you were saying, I sort of, while you look at it as a business, I sort of see it as like, how can I educate folks with what I'm going to post in my own way without it being like, hey, I'm trying to tell you something. um, but yeah, that's just what has really gotten me off of, not to say off of social media, but why I don't necessarily engage with certain spiritual groups online, because when I just feel that nasty energy, it's like, it won't even be like an attack. It'll be like someone would have asked a question, and there's just like you really just, sometimes there's just no room to really just talk because of the way the formatting is on social media. People just, like you were saying, it's just confrontational. So I just like to remove myself from that. And I just found that the most spiritual interactions and engagements that I do have will probably just be with folks that I see out every day, like, or just people, real life people, opposed to, and it might not even be people that I know, because online I will come across different accounts and things will resonate with me, and I'll be like, wow, I just learned something from this, and for that, cool. But a lot of the times it is, you know, you see something that is just, it hurts your heart to see somebody taking something so sacred and so important and just not really giving it any regard. And in those situations, it's a lot harder to have, for me personally, to have discernment, because it's like, dang, well, if I don't say something, will this person ever know? And then it's like, I don't know. I've sort of shied away from that community somewhat on social media, just because in the day and age that we're on, that's why we're saying racially, like, people are just ready, or just feel divided. So when it feels authentic and it feels good, yes. But most of the time, I just feel like I have to just sort of look for that in real life, because if I look for it online, like you said, I'll just be scrolling and scrolling and getting upset. So
Yeah. And I guess for like a final like question, what would be a message of like positivity or words of encouragement you would send to folks, especially as we start off this new year? Still a bit of uncertainty in regards to what's going on with certain social issues, world events. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. And so I just want to know, like, what would be some words of encouragement you would give to people during this time?
I guess I would say, just, you may not always have patience, but when you have patience, try to use it. And, you know, just working in that, you know, that working, really trying to work out of love and that love frequency, because at the end of the day, when we look at the way things are with our country and spiritually, how the state that we're in, just really just keeping that reminder in your head that everyone is on their own walk, or like everyone's where they're at on their walk in these times. And really, just the more that you can have grace for other people, I feel like it'll just help. That helps me, by having grace and understanding and trying not to take things personally. You know, when you have an opportunity that you could go in on somebody on a comment, just choosing not to say anything at all, you know what I'm saying? Or just meditating on it later. Just finding times that you can show kindness or that positivity. It's really hard to do that these days, but I feel like the more that we can do that, hopefully it'll just create that chain reaction. That, and then just continuing to find what it is to nourish you. And like we were saying with the New Year's resolutions, knowing that that's not just a resolution you have to make once a year and you have to be perfect at it, but just also giving yourself grace to know that you will mess up and you will have some days where you do go in on somebody, but that's okay. Because, you know, it's about growth and recognizing your responses. I know that's just such a long-winded answer. But yeah, I guess just having that mindfulness and trying to show kindness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we can end it on that note. That I really enjoyed your energy and your time during this chat, and I really think people would find something in this video that they resonate with as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I know this is one of our first times really getting to talk face to face. So I'm so excited I got to finally meet you.
Same here, a fellow Meredith alum. It's always nice to meet a fellow angel. So thank you so much, Sarah.
Okay.
I can't wait for people to view it.
Yes, until we talk again.
Yes. Bye.
See ya.